Before the storm broke and before the secrets emerged, my life was defined by quiet certainty. I had always believed that the gentle cadence of our everyday routine was enough to safeguard our marriage. My wife, Rebecca, and I shared countless evenings spent in calm contentment, simple dinners, long walks around the neighborhood, and small gestures of love that, to me, were proof of our bond. Yet, beneath that seemingly placid surface, something dark and foreboding was beginning to stir, heralding a change I never could have anticipated. It was during one of those early mornings, when the world was still cloaked in the soft silence of pre-dawn, that I first sensed an unsettling shift. I woke up to an unusual stillness in our bedroom. The gentle hum of the alarm clock seemed to echo an unfamiliar tension. Rebecca's side of the bed was cold, her warmth absent as she lay motionless in a state of troubled sleep. I watched her for a long moment, puzzled by the strain etched on her delicate features, and then decided not to wake her. Instead, I retreated to the kitchen to make coffee, my thoughts adrift in an inexplicable premonition that the day would not unfold as usual. As the morning advanced, small anomalies began to reveal themselves. I noticed a slight hesitation in the way Rebecca answered my questions about her plans for the day, and a fleeting glimpse of anxiety in her eyes when she reached for her phone. These were minor details, easily dismissed as the consequence of a restless night, but together, they planted a seed of doubt in my mind. I tried to convince myself that everyone is off days, yet an undercurrent of uncertainty kept me awake long after the sun had risen. Later that day, I decided to tackle some household paperwork on the shared computer in our study. While sorting through files and old documents, I accidentally discovered a folder titled Private. Curiosity overcame me, and with a sinking feeling in my stomach, I clicked it open. Inside, I found a series of emails and chat logs that I wasn't meant to see, messages between Rebecca and someone simply identified by the initial D. At first, they appeared to be mundane exchanges, but the tone was intimate and laced with coded language that hinted at clandestine meetings and secret rendezvous. My heart pounded as I scrolled through the messages, each one chipping away at the illusion of our secure life. In that moment, the world as I knew it began to fracture. The emails described late-night encounters in dimly lit cafes and whispered promises of an escape from the monotony of everyday existence. I sat there in shock, feeling as though I had been plunged into a realm of betrayal without any warning. The revelation that my wife had willingly engaged in a secret correspondence with a man whose identity was hidden behind a single letter was devastating. I felt betrayed, confused, and numb, a cocktail of emotions that rendered me incapable of immediate action. Unable to shake the overwhelming dread, I spent the rest of the day in a haze of disbelief and silent turmoil. Every glance from Rebecca now carried a weight of suspicion. Every casual remark seemed laced with unspoken secrets. I began to analyze our routine interactions with a critical eye. Had I missed the warning signs all along? The thoughtful smiles, the tender touches, they suddenly appeared as carefully constructed facades, masking a reality that I had been blissfully unaware of. As night fell, the house grew quiet, and I found myself alone in the study with the evidence laid out before me. I printed out every incriminating message and organized them meticulously. The digital trail was undeniable. Rebecca's secret life was unfolding through these hidden texts and emails, painting a picture of an affair that was not only intimate but potentially dangerous. The messages referenced vague meeting locations near industrial areas and mentioned plans that hinted at a connection with someone involved in unsavory activities. The more I read, the more it became clear that this was no fleeting flirtation. It was a sustained liaison with a man who lurked in the shadows of the criminal underworld. Haunted by the evidence, I turned the lights low and replayed every memory we had shared. I tried to reconcile the gentle, loving Rebecca I had known with the mysterious woman who now appeared capable of such secret behavior. The contradiction was overwhelming. In our quiet moments together, I had seen nothing to suggest that she harbored a desire for danger or deceit. Yet here she was, entangled in a web of coded messages that spoke of secret meetings, promises of escape, and a life that diverged sharply from the stable home we had built. The agony of betrayal mingled with a desperate need to understand. I began to document everything in a journal, recording every detail, every date and time mentioned in the messages, hoping that in the process, I might unravel the full extent of her double life. It wasn't just the discovery of the affair that pained me, it was the realization that the woman I had trusted implicitly had been living a life that was hidden behind layers of deception. Every new piece of evidence felt like a blow to the heart, a confirmation that the life I thought we shared was nothing more than a carefully curated illusion. As the clock ticked late into the night, I wrestled with my next steps. Should I confront her immediately, or gather more evidence to better understand the danger that lurked behind the simple act of infidelity. The rational part of my mind urged caution, while the emotional part cried out for answers and resolution. I knew that the confrontation, when it came, would shatter any remaining vestige of normalcy and force us both into a confrontation with a truth too painful to ignore. I spent hours reviewing every message, every email, the words blurring together as I searched for clues that might explain how this betrayal had been allowed to flourish. I recalled the subtle changes in her behavior, the fleeting moment when her smile seemed forced, the way her eyes darted away when I mentioned plans for the evening. All these memories converged into a single, crushing realization. Rebecca had chosen a path that led her away from me and into the arms of a man whose identity was cloaked in secrecy and danger. By the time dawn broke, painting the sky in muted shades of gray, I had resolved that nothing could remain as it was. The safe, predictable life I once took for granted was irrevocably broken by the evidence of her betrayal. I knew that my next steps would be fraught with pain and confrontation, but ignorance was no longer an option. With the dossier of secret emails and texts securely saved and printed, I prepared myself for the moment when I would have to face Rebecca and demand the truth. In the silence of the early morning, as I sat alone with the weight of evidence in my hands, I felt a profound sorrow and a steely determination intertwine within me. The world had shifted in that quiet moment before dawn, and nothing would ever be the same again. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, steeling myself for the inevitable confrontation that loomed ahead, a confrontation that would force us both to reckon with the shadows before the storm. In the days following that fateful night, my existence became consumed by the pursuit of truth. Every moment was marked by an unsettling tension, a constant awareness that behind the veneer of our home, a dark secret was festering. I could not let the evidence I had discovered rest. I had to dig deeper, to uncover every detail of Rebecca's dangerous liaison. My investigation began in earnest. I revisited every text message and email, cross-referencing timestamps and locations with my own memories of our daily routine. The more I delved into the digital correspondence, the more I realized that this affair was not a fleeting infatuation. It was a carefully nurtured connection that had developed over months. The messages from Dee were laced with coded language and subtle threats, a language I didn't fully understand, but that clearly belonged to a world of criminal activity. Late nights became my constant companion. I would sit alone at the kitchen table, the glow of my laptop illuminating pages of incriminating messages, while rain pattered against the window. I meticulously documented every piece of evidence, printing out emails and saving screenshots of texts. Each document added to the mosaic of betrayal, painting a picture of a woman who had willingly immersed herself in a realm of danger. I discovered recurring references to clandestine meetings in deserted industrial areas, to whispered promises of protection and illicit gains. It was as though Rebecca had found in Dee not just passion, but an escape into a world where power and risk went hand in hand. I began to notice changes in her routine as well. Rebecca started leaving the house at odd hours, her explanations growing increasingly vague and inconsistent. When I asked about her whereabouts, she offered rehearsed responses that did little to allay my suspicions. I followed the digital trail with a mounting sense of dread, each new discovery confirming that her affair was no accident. The messages spoke of secret rendezvous and coded instructions, details that hinted at a partnership built not on romance alone, but on mutual involvement in dangerous activities. One evening, as I was sifting through the latest batch of emails, I came across a conversation that chilled me to the core. The email thread detailed plans for a meeting at a location known for its association with criminal enterprises. The language was stark, laced with urgency and caution. There were even references to settling scores and making moves, phrases that suggested that Rebecca's involvement went far beyond a simple extramarital affair. It seemed that she had become entangled in something much more perilous than I could have ever imagined. I began to fear for her safety. The thought that my wife was involved with someone connected to organized crime was a terror I could neither comprehend nor ignore. I recalled how our lives had once revolved around simple routines, work, family dinners, and quiet weekends. Now, every shadow seemed to whisper danger, every knock at the door a harbinger of further betrayal. The man behind the initial D was not merely a lover. He was a link to a world that could easily spiral out of control, dragging us into a vortex of criminality and threat. My heart ached with betrayal, but amidst the swirling emotions, a grim determination took hold. I resolved to compile every scrap of evidence, not merely for my own understanding, but in the hope that confronting Rebecca with an irrefutable dossier might force her to explain herself. I created detailed logs, noting every suspicious call, every unexplained absence, and every covert meeting. I even enlisted the help of a trusted friend who had experience in investigative work. Together, we attempted to trace the origins of the emails and texts, piecing together a network that pointed to dangerous individuals beyond the realm of normal infidelity. Each day, as I dug deeper, I felt myself descending further into a nightmare. The safe haven of my marriage was now overshadowed by the threat of criminal entanglements. The evidence was damning. Rebecca's words, her actions, the very locations mentioned in her communications all converged to reveal a web of betrayal that extended far beyond the personal. It was a revelation that shook me to my core, forcing me to question everything I had ever believed about our life together. As the days blurred into nights, I realized that I was no longer just a betrayed husband. I had become an unwilling investigator in a case that threatened not only my heart but my very existence. The danger was real, and the stakes were higher than I could have ever foreseen. With each piece of evidence logged and every message deciphered, the image of Rebecca as the woman I once loved was replaced by that of someone who had willingly embraced a perilous double life. By the time I finally compiled the full dossier, I was overwhelmed by a mixture of sorrow, anger, and dread. I had documented every incriminating detail, the secret texts, the coded emails, and even a digital map marking the locations of her clandestine meetings. It was undeniable proof that my wife had become entangled in a dangerous liaison with a criminal element. The dossier was both my salvation and my curse. It held the truth, yet it also heralded a future steeped in uncertainty and peril. In the quiet hours before dawn, as I reviewed the final details one last time, I knew that the moment of confrontation was inevitable. The evidence was irrefutable, and I could no longer delay the painful conversation that would change everything. My heart pounded with the knowledge that I was about to face a woman whose secrets had dragged our lives into a realm of darkness. The safety of our past was gone, replaced by a looming threat that promised to upend every certainty I once had. The day of confrontation dawned with a sense of inevitability that I could neither escape nor ignore. I woke to a heavy sky and an even heavier heart, fully aware that the carefully amassed evidence would soon shatter the last remnants of the life I thought I knew. I rehearsed the conversation in my head countless times, preparing myself for the torrent of emotions that would inevitably follow. At breakfast that morning, Rebecca's demeanor was markedly different. Gone was the usual ease of conversation. In its place was a guarded silence and nervous glances that betrayed her inner turmoil. I watched her closely, my gaze unwavering, as I set the dossier, evidence of her secret affair with D, on the table. The weight of that folder was more than physical. It carried the burden of every lie, every secret meeting, every night spent apart. "Rebecca," I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt, "we need to talk." The words hung in the air, heavy and charged with inevitability. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of the rain tapping against the window and the low hum of our refrigerator. Then, with trembling hands, I opened the folder and began to lay out the evidence before her. Her eyes widened as she recognized the screenshots, printed emails, and the detailed timeline I had painstakingly compiled. I could see the shock, fear, and beneath it all, a flicker of resignation in her gaze. I didn't know how to tell you," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. The admission hung between us, raw and exposed, as if every secret in that folder had been ripped from the depths of our shared past. "Tell me the truth, Rebecca," I demanded, my voice rising with a mix of anger and heartbreak. "Who is D? How deep does this go?" The question spilled out, urgent and relentless, as I tried to grasp the full extent of the betrayal. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears as she began to speak. Her confession was slow, hesitant, and laden with regret. She explained that what had begun as an innocent conversation with a colleague had spiraled into something far more dangerous. Over time, the thrill of the forbidden had lured her into secret meetings with D, a man who was not just a lover but someone deeply entangled in criminal activities. With every word she uttered, I felt as if the ground beneath me was crumbling. The revelation that my wife had willingly stepped into a world of danger, where every clandestine meeting could have dire consequences, was a shock that reverberated through my very soul. I listened, torn between the urge to scream in fury and the painful need to understand how the woman I loved had lost her way. Her confession was punctuated by long pauses and quivering sobs. She spoke of the lure of excitement, of feeling alive in a way that our mundane life could no longer provide. But more than that, she admitted that the criminal world offered her a dangerous sense of power and escape, one that ultimately betrayed the very vows we had taken. The room was filled with a silence so thick that it nearly drowned out the sound of our labored breathing. I demanded to know why I had been kept in the dark for so long, why every lie had been meticulously woven into the fabric of our everyday life. The truth was painful. Rebecca admitted that she had been complicit in her own betrayal. She had allowed herself to be seduced not just by the allure of a forbidden romance, but by a life that promised excitement, danger, and a freedom she felt was lacking in our marriage. As the confrontation reached its fevered pitch, I felt a maelstrom of emotions surge within me: betrayal, sorrow, anger, and an overwhelming sense of loss. The evidence lay bare between us, a damning testament to a secret life that had slowly eroded everything I once believed in. In that charged moment, I realized that our marriage was at a crossroads. I was faced with the impossible choice of either attempting to salvage the fragments of our broken trust or accepting that the woman I once loved had irreversibly changed. The conversation stretched into hours, every minute marked by raw admissions and tearful apologies. I demanded to know if there was any part of her that still loved me, and she, through a haze of regret, managed to say that remnants of our past affection lingered despite everything. Yet, her words rang hollow against the backdrop of undeniable evidence. The confrontation was not simply an explosion of pent-up emotions, it was the painful unveiling of a truth that could not be undone. By the time the storm outside subsided into a reluctant drizzle, the conversation had come to an agonizing pause. I sat there, my heart shattered and my mind reeling, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. The dossier of betrayal had irrevocably altered the landscape of our lives, and as I looked into Rebecca's tear-streaked eyes, I understood that the path to healing, if it existed at all, would be long and treacherous. In the weeks that followed our explosive confrontation, the reality of Rebecca's betrayal settled over our lives like a relentless shadow. The home we had once filled with laughter and shared dreams was now permeated by silence, suspicion, and a pervasive sense of loss. I found myself caught in a limbo of conflicting emotions: anger, sorrow, and a desperate yearning for answers that might never come. The evidence of her dangerous liaison with D had not only shattered my trust, but also thrust us into a world of uncertainty. I spent long, sleepless nights wrestling with the question of how a marriage that had once seemed so solid could crumble under the weight of secrets and lies. I retraced every moment we had shared, every quiet dinner and tender conversation, searching for clues that might explain how Rebecca had slipped into a double life so perilous and dark. In the days that followed, Rebecca and I attempted to piece together a semblance of normalcy. We sat together at the kitchen table, the dossier of evidence still spread out like a grim reminder of everything that had been lost. Conversations turned to silence, and attempts at reconciliation were punctuated by tears and halting admissions. I sought therapy and even reached out to a close friend who had once helped me navigate difficult times, hoping that someone might help me understand the tangled web of betrayal. Slowly, I began to see that the road to healing would require more than confronting the facts. It would demand a fundamental re-examination of who we were and whether our lives could be rebuilt on the fractured remains of trust. I spent hours writing in a journal, trying to sort through my grief and anger, while also acknowledging that the dangerous connection Rebecca had with D had irrevocably changed our future. It wasn't just about infidelity. It was about the fact that she had willingly entered a realm of criminality, a realm that could have endangered both our lives. Yet, amid the darkness, there flickered a fragile hope. I realized that I had a choice: to let the betrayal define me forever, or to use it as the catalyst for a new beginning, a future forged by painful lessons and hard-won clarity. I resolved to take control of my own destiny, even if it meant stepping away from a past that had become irretrievably broken. With each passing day, I took small steps to reclaim my identity: a pursuit of hobbies long abandoned, long walks to clear my mind, and quiet moments of introspection that slowly mended the wounded parts of my soul. Rebecca, too, was forced to confront the consequences of her actions. In our tentative conversations, she expressed regret and a desire to make amends, but I could no longer ignore the fact that the dangerous criminal connection she had embraced had put both our lives at risk. The path forward was uncertain, filled with difficult decisions and the ever-present specter of past transgressions. The evidence of her betrayal would always remain, a scar etched in the fabric of our shared history. But I knew that I had to choose whether to let it destroy me or to learn from it and forge a new way forward. In the quiet aftermath of our confrontation, I began to rebuild my life piece by piece. I sought solace in friends, in therapy, and in the simple act of accepting that not all wounds can be healed overnight. The process was agonizing, marked by moments of intense grief interspersed with flashes of determination. I started to rediscover the person I had been before the storm of betrayal, a man with dreams and aspirations, not defined solely by the pain of a shattered marriage. One crisp autumn evening, as I walked alone along a familiar path in our neighborhood, I felt the chill of the past slowly recede. The vibrant hues of falling leaves seemed to whisper promises of renewal, of life continuing despite even the most devastating betrayal. In that moment, I resolved that while Rebecca's dangerous liaison with Dee would always be a part of our history, it would not dictate the course of my future. I chose to view the experience as a harsh lesson in the fragility of trust, one that would ultimately empower me to build a life based on honesty, resilience, and a cautious hope for tomorrow. As I closed the journal that night, I felt both the weight of the past and the stirring of a new beginning. I knew that the journey ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but I was determined to face it with an open heart and an unyielding resolve to reclaim the life that had once seemed so secure. The dangerous criminal connection that had once threatened to upend everything now served as a grim reminder of the cost of betrayal and the necessity of forging a path forward, even when the darkness seems all-consuming. In the end, the evidence of Rebecca's betrayal, as horrifying as it was, became the impetus for a profound transformation in my life. I emerged from the ordeal a changed man, scarred yet wiser, with a resolve to never again allow deceit to define my destiny. The road ahead was uncertain, but as I embraced each new day, I carried with me the hope that even in the aftermath of the darkest betrayal, there lies the possibility of renewal and the strength to rebuild.